Today we have Bobby Pratt of the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. Bobby, welcome. I'm so excited to talk with you today and just really looking forward to getting a lot more good information for myself as well as for our viewers. Really
Thanks,
important
Holly.
stuff.
I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, Bobby, first I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved or how you started really help start the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project.
That's a great question. So I've been born and raised in Michigan. I'm 63 now, and I've always loved the water. I had some bad experiences when I was a child out in Lake Michigan and became very frightened of the water. Was taught how to swim by throwing me out of the boat, which really just only taught me how to be very afraid of the water and hang on to the boat. So I've always loved the water, grown up in Michigan and spent a lot of time at the beach, would wade around in the beach, never really learned how to swim properly until I was in college. And then there was really kind of no stopping me. I became a swimmer, and then I became a lifeguard, and started surfing, started windsurfing when it became a sport, started stand-up paddleboarding very early in the sport when people were using long canoe paddles that they would be able to order, and ordered one of my first paddles from C4. And Todd Bradley, who the president of the company, answered the phone. It was such an early company back then.
Wow.
I spent most of my career as a firefighter, paramedic. I spent 25 years with the city of East Lansing. I am still a licensed paramedic. Always kept that water safety in the background, and like became a lifeguard instructor, did a lot of instructing for my fire department and other fire departments. I was lucky enough to be sent around the country, trained in different aspects of water safety and ice rescue safety, because we have the cold water here in Michigan. And I had an incident in 2003 in September when I took my son to Grand Haven to go surfing. Would have been one of his first experiences surfing. He just got a wetsuit and the water was starting to get cold, but the waves really don't start until we get cold water. And as we pulled into the Grand Haven State Park, the beach was closed. There were rescue boats out in the water and a helicopter flying what my friend Mario Vittoni, a rescue swimmer for the Coast Guard, calls low and slow. And there was a clutch of probably a dozen people huddled together on the beach. And it was obvious that there was a body recovery going on. And my son was, I don't know, 9 or 10 at the time. And I really saw it as a critical point in teaching him and framing what we were witnessing in a way that would be a positive experience. I didn't want to, scare him. I didn't want to make him have an irrational fear of the water like I had until I learned how to swim. He was a great swimmer at that time. But I also didn't want to underplay it. I didn't want to, not show the true gravity of the situation. And we decided not to surf that day. We went up to Muskegon and thought maybe we'd get in the water in Muskegon, but he was just kind of a little freaked out by the idea that there was a dead body in the water, and I respected that. So we came home, and it got me thinking. It's not the first time I've been to Lake Michigan where there's been a body recovery in process, and it got me thinking about, how often does that happen? And it was 2003, so the internet was a thing, and I thought, oh, this will be really easy to figure out how many people every year drown in Lake Michigan. And unfortunately, the way that we catalog drownings is problematic, and nobody at that time knew. The Coast Guard could tell me how many drownings they responded to, but they don't respond to all of them. If somebody is pulled from the water and taken immediately to the hospital, you don't call the Coast Guard. If there's a body missing, they do call the Coast Guard. So that couldn't help me. I was a paramedic, so I had some doctor friends. I knew the county coroner very well. I called him on the phone and asked him, if this kind of records are kept. And the CDC does indeed keep drowning records, but they don't separate exactly where they happened. They separate things into, did it happen in a natural body of water, like a river, a lake, or a pond? Did it happen in a man-made structure, like a backyard pool or a bathtub, something like that? So I just started keeping track, and the numbers were really astounding. And the first couple of years, about 2007 to 2009, I would just, anytime I heard about one, I would make notes of it and things. And then in 2009, the numbers really were alarming, and we started getting some media attention to it. And the executive director and co-founder of the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project with me, Dave Benjamin, had a non-fatal drowning incident where he was surfing, and his leash broke in very cold water the day after Christmas. And he almost drowned, and he became very passionate about water safety and was asking some questions. This is back in the days of the Yahoo forums, and on the Great Lakes Surf Association page, he was asking questions, and people kept pointing him to me. So he called me, and we started chatting and got together and thought, it'd be a great idea to start tracking these numbers a little bit better and start doing some classes teaching. We started teaching surfers because we tend to be in the water when the water tends to be kind of rough, and we got a little bit more practiced at collecting the numbers. And since 2010, when we formalized it, there have been over 1,000 drownings on the 5 Great Lakes.
Wow.
And so that's really why I'm so passionate about it, is because every one of these drownings, Andy Fox and his mother and his brother Ryan and his sister and close family friends were the little clutch of people on the beach. And people think, wow, 1,000 drownings are a lot, but each one of these people had a mother and a father. Many of them had grandparents, brothers, sisters, the first responders that recover the body, and the helicopter pilot and the rescue swimmer for the Coast Guard. It all affects everybody. So
yes.
Real quickly, drowning is the leading cause of accidental death in kids 1 to 4. The second leading cause of accidental death in kids under 15. So your children are at high risk for drowning. Boys tend to drown 4 times more often than girls. 80% of our drownings from 1 year old to 101 years old are male. So I think the reason why. I have a son and a daughter, and I know the reason why. Males tend to think they're much bigger and stronger than they are. That's kind of the way our brains are wired. We tend to take more risks, and we tend to try and impress people. So peer pressure plays a part into that. So so we're keep on keeping on, and the drownings continue, and the need for education continues. We do several things with the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. We like I said, we track the drownings. We're the only group that tracks the drownings. That in and of itself is very difficult, because there's a lot of times when we don't have all the information we need. There are a lot of times when family members will call looking for information. We do education programs. We do everything from preschool kids to senior citizens, and everybody has their own specific needs. Stand-up paddleboarders have their own specific needs, and we'll certainly get into that. And we, like I said, we work with families that have lost loved ones. A lot of them have started up foundations or started support groups to try and help with the tragedy. And then we do PR and media work. And then kind of a lot of special assignments. They don't really have, sometimes they're different things. We work with a lot of municipalities. We're working right now with Gary, Indiana, trying to help train their lifeguards. Work with cities to try and make their municipalities safer. And there's a lot of things that you can do. Vicki Check, Andy Fox's mom, was instrumental in making Grand Haven one of the safest beaches in the area. They have cameras, they have throw rings. The throw rings are automatically are mounted, so they automatically alert the 911 dispatch if they're pulled. There's a real-time camera up on the hills that Will Beaton, a meteorologist, put up. And if they pull a throw ring from the pier in Grand Haven, it automatically pan tilts and zooms directly to the area, and the
Wow.
first responders can see in real time
Pinpoint. Wow.
what's happening. And you know, it's great when it's a real tragedy, but it's also great when you know, somebody maliciously takes the throw ring and tosses it into the river or into the lake, and then starts walking down the pier. The dispatcher can say, yeah, it's the guy with the gray sweatshirt.
Right. Oh my gosh.
Threw it in the water, and now he's walking down the pier. Yep, that's the one. You just passed him. And then one of the police officers on this guy, and dispatcher, yep, that's the one. So
Oh
they
my
were able to,
gosh.
yeah. So you know, it's been quite a journey. Unfortunately, it continues. We'd love to put ourselves out of business and make everybody safe enough in the water, but the stand-up paddleboard industry is a huge challenge, and it is very frustrating because most of the players in the stand-up paddleboard industry have no interest in safety at all, and
Wow.
it's very frustrating for me.
Well, Bobby, that is a lot to unpack, and a great start. I think that is, first of all, I just want to say thank you, because that, just for your heart and your just having that experience, I mean, your background, just informing that moment with your son, and just how those wheels started turning for you. I mean, you know, it's what a tragic moment, but what a great teachable moment for your son, and the way you handled that, and but also how that segued you into, you know, having continued, I should say, heart and passion to see people safe on the water. And you know, I appreciate your nerdy side very much. I call it a nerdy side in a very loving way, because I love to research and find facts and things like that, and find out the whys behind things. So I really appreciate you kind of diving into those drowning records. And so what was the most challenging thing, I guess, with that, in terms of, like you said, the record keeping? So there, like, where is the, I don't even know what to say, like, where is the, I guess, the disconnect between, like, what's recorded and what's not?
There are several of them. And
Okay.
Dr. Linda Kwan from, I'm not sure exactly where she's at now. I think that in Washington, the state of Washington, doing drowning research. She has suggests she's one of the, like, gurus of drowning prevention, statistical analysis, and things like that. And she and some other researchers believe that drowning is actually underreported by as much as 30%.
Wow.
Right,
That's
right.
big.
It's
Yeah.
huge. It's huge, and there are several reasons for it. I think as we get more and more technologically savvy, that number is coming down, and has come down. But when I started, there were lots of times when there would be pressure on a coroner to not label something as a drowning, because that's bad for business. If you're a tourist community, you don't want, you know,
Right.
you don't want a headline, boy drowns in, you know, on Main Street. I'm not going to even mention cities, because I don't want to get the ire of
Right.
cities. But so we have that problem. We have some problems with drowning statistics in general. They're all categorized by the ICD codes, the International Code for Disease. And until 2012, if you survived the submersion incident and were put, say, on a ventilator for 48 hours or 72 hours and died subsequently, that would not be considered a drowning, because the ICD-10 codes had it listed as drowning, listed as something that happens within 48 hours of a submersion incident. So I have friends who their son's a firefighter in Australia. His son Samuel had a non-fatal drowning, had a brain injury because of the lack of oxygen to the brain, and survived in a fairly vegetative state. He could open his eyes, he could respond to words, but was nonverbal, and needed round-the-clock care for, I think, 12 years. And
Well, and
no,
that's
I'm
where
sorry.
you made me think of that. I mean, and what a heartbreaking story. You know, thankfully he survived, but still very tragic ending to that. And but I'm sorry to cut you off, but
No,
that brought a thought up, is that like there's that issue which a lot of people I'm sure don't know about or aren't aware of, is that there's secondary drowning that can happen. So did they not include that secondary drowning
we don't use that
in
term.
that?
We don't use that term anymore.
Okay.
Because it has a couple of different meanings.
Okay.
And so in 2012, the World Health Organization kind of redefined drowning
Okay.
to, and I wish I had it specifically with me, but I'm paraphrasing. So it's anytime an airway is submerged is a drowning. The drowning process begins. So
Okay.
if you fall into a backyard pool and you inhale a little bit of water, or you struggle in the water and come out, that's still a drowning. We would call that a non-fatal drowning. So drowning
Okay.
can have three outcomes. You can have a person who falls in the water, has their airway blocked, has problems, comes out, costs a little bit, does fine, recovers completely. So that's one of the three. The second one can be someone like Samuel Morris, who fell into the pool as a 2-year-old, was pulled out, resuscitative measures were begun. Unfortunately, he had a brain injury that stayed with him for his entire life. And truly, he died from the drowning incident. He just
Wow.
died 9 years later from the drowning incident.
Wow.
And then you have situations where someone have prolonged long-term brain injury, and they die from something else later on. So you can have three effects from drowning. You can survive and be fine. You can survive and have impairment, and you can have a fatal drowning.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for explaining that, because and so they classify all that as drowning now. They've kind of erased that secondary drowning term.
Yep.
Okay.
We don't want to use near drowning, because again,
Yeah.
that's confusing. Some people used to say near
Right.
drowning was someone who survived a drowning. We don't use there's no such thing as dry drowning. We could do a whole segment on that and why
Right.
that's an absolute myth. But yeah, the terminology is important.
Very important. It's very important. Thank you so much for clarifying that. So, and I apologize if I look down sometimes, but I'm
No,
taking
I'm doing the
notes as
same
you're
thing.
talking.
Yeah.
And yeah, because this is all, well, I love you brought up too, about Grand Haven's safety measures. I mean, that camera is fascinating. In fact, we have one here on the Grand Traverse Bay, but I think it's mainly for weather watching. But yeah, I guess maybe talk about like why don't more places have stuff like this? I'm originally from Chicago. I grew up in the Chicagoland area, but I lived in city proper for 17 years. And
Oh, wow.
And you know, of course, we're right there on Lake Michigan, and I lived, you know, right across from the lake.
Nice.
And yeah, so we were at the lake all the time, at the beach all the time. And you know, there were you would hear about drownings quite frequently, unfortunately. And so, because as you know, as we both know, Lake Michigan is no joke. And and so yeah, so you know, talk a little bit about that. I mean, obviously we can know the first reason, maybe finances, but you know, I'm sure there's enough money to put into that somewhere. So why are communities resistant to having more safety at their beachfronts and lakes?
Let me start with Chicago, because it's a great
Yeah.
example. Chicago has a fine lifeguarding agency. It at one
Yes.
time had a world-class life-saving agency. Joe Pecoraro was a lifeguard in the 1950s. Very talented man, very tremendous leader. Moved up the ranks, became a mate, became a captain, ended up running the Chicago Parks District lifeguard program for decades. And we call him Papa Joe. I had a lot of friends that were lifeguards there, and I mean, he was just super passionate about water safety, super knowledgeable, an absolute advocate for water safety, both with the lifeguarding agencies, and then learn to swim programs are a tremendous drowning prevention effort. And so Chicago, like I said, has a great effort with it. You need a champion like that. Every community needs a Papa Joe so that they can do it. In Grand Haven, like I said, it was Vicki Check who lost her son Andy, and a lot of these happen because of tragedies. And so there's several reasons. One is the myth that there's increased liability with lifeguards, and that's an absolute myth. Again, we could talk a whole segment about that. But there is very little liability for a municipality to have lifeguards. Now, if they don't train them, if they don't equip them, then that's a whole separate story, but that's not a liability issue. There's also the belief that drowning victims are tourists, they're not local people. And so they're not kind of valued as much, which again is a myth. Megan Dotson from the National Weather Service has done some research and found that most people live fairly close, to the beach, within an hour or two of the beach. So it's not just foreigners, it's not just tourists that are having problems. And there's a general perception, not only among those people in power, but in the general public, that drowning victims are weak or stupid, and that's why they drown. And again, nothing could be further from the truth. But people say, we bring up the idea of lifeguards, which is the gold standard. All of our beaches, public beaches, should have lifeguards. And people say, well, if people would just use common sense. And I actually did a presentation at the National Drowning Prevention Alliance annual conference about the myth of common sense, because it's not common sense. And just real quickly, common sense would tell you that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But if you're caught in a rip current and you're being pulled away from shore is right here. But in order to escape, you need to swim a longer way around. So it's not common sense. And people think, oh, they just need to learn how to swim. Well, we've lost high school swimmers in Lake Michigan to drownings. Franz Crippen was an Olympic medalist for the United States in long distance swimming. He drowned in a race. People think people are stupid. And Matt Coker drowned in New Buffalo, was an A student, was a good swimmer. His parents taught him how to swim. He's the only child, but he was 6'4", 250 pounds. And he got caught in a rip current and didn't have a strategy for surviving it. And again, people end up blaming the victim. So there's not a lot of emphasis to be put on life saving. And unfortunately, the other myth with drowning is that people think that drowning is completely different than how it actually is. My generation watched a TV show called Baywatch. Your kids watched a TV cartoon called SpongeBob SquarePants. And in both of those instances, I mean, they're far ends of the extreme, but they portray drowning as this long, loud, affair. Actually, SpongeBob has an incident where he and Patrick, the starfish, are drowning when SpongeBob takes Larry the lobster's lifeguard job. And I mean, the idea that a sponge or a starfish could drown is just absurd. And the idea that in Baywatch, someone is in the water. We use a clip in our training of fisherman falls out of a boat, and for almost 3 minutes he's at the surface waving and yelling and carrying on. Well, the hunky guy runs down the beach in slow motion, and all the trucks come and all these things. But drowning happens really within a matter of seconds. It can happen in as short as 10 to 30 seconds. Typically a drowning victim is only at the surface for 45 seconds to a minute. And then they go under. They're unable to wave, because if you lift your arms up in the water, your body's going to sink deeper into the water. So instinctively you're pushing down in a desperate attempt to keep your head above the water, and you're gasping for air. And because you're gasping for air, you're unable to yell. So children often drown right in front of adults, sometimes in front of their parents, and people don't know that they were even in trouble, because it doesn't look like they know drowning looks like, because I've seen it 100 times on Baywatch, or I've seen it on an old movie or something like that. So It's
Yes.
a complex issue, and it doesn't get nearly the amount of attention that it deserves. It doesn't get nearly the amount of funding that it deserves. And so it's
Yeah.
always an upward climb.
Well, and it's interesting that, unfortunately, like, tragedies have to happen before attention is placed on it, and enough tragedies. I remember, and this is like an unrelated thing, but we're in the area that I grew up, there was a really dangerous corner. It intersected with our small town with this major highway, this major thoroughfare. And there were so many car accidents there. And they were trying to fight with the county for a flashing light, and
Exactly. Yep.
they literally said, and I had gotten into an accident there. My mother had some friends of our family died there.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
we knew several people who had, personally, who had been in an accident there. And it was because of the visibility, because there were lots of fields. It was a corn and soybean area. And so anyway, but literally the county told us that not enough people have died to get a flashing light. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how many people need to
Exactly.
and it's just,
Exactly.
but it's like, yeah, I mean, so I'm sure that it sounds like that's kind of what we're finding with this, is like, but it's kind of sad. It's like, how many people have to die before it's important enough to take care of, like, yeah, it's kind of fascinating and unfortunate. So hopefully we can make enough noise and in a better way.
Yeah, and coming back around to the stand-up paddleboard industry,
Yeah.
Andres Pombo drowned, I don't remember which year, probably 5 or 6 years ago, in the Columbia River. He was a professional stand-up paddleboard racer, and was training for the Gorge Games, which is a race down the Columbia River, and
Yes.
wasn't wearing either a leash or a life jacket. And the belief is that he thought it would, that his sponsor would object to leashes and life jackets, because they just, the stand-up paddleboard industry, I don't know, sees them as a sign of weakness, or they see them as an affront to freedoms, or an affront to, the surfer mentality of kind of a rebel kind of thing. But it's just baffling to me, and it's so frustrating for me, because really, if they were to embrace safety, it benefits everybody. It's a win-win-win-win
Absolutely.
situation. If you're a
Yeah.
retailer and you're selling stand-up paddle boards, the markup on a board is only $100 on a 1,000, but a leash, the markup is, considerable. If you're going to buy a good coiled leash, you're looking at $40-50. If you're looking at life jackets, you can spend $150 on a waist pack inflatable life jacket. So the retailers will make more money. The industry will decrease its liability. I think that they're in real trouble of a wrongful death suit that challenges the whole industry. The manufacturer of the board, if their advertisements don't show safety gear, the retailer that sold the board without selling a leash or a life jacket, or even talking about it. The magazines, you pick up a magazine, it's a little better than it was, when I started 20 years ago, but you pick up a stand-up paddleboard magazine now, and about 90% of the photographs don't have life jackets even on the board, let alone on the absolute person. So it's a tough sell. So everybody gets safer. When we have fatal drownings, then people look at closing beaches and limiting access. That's a bonus. So the more we portray safety, the more likely we are to maintain the access to water that we have, and we save lives. So it just makes,
Yes.
to me, it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's interesting, since we had chatted on the phone before this chat. You had mentioned about the magazines, and I you know, scrolling through Instagram or whatever, I was intentionally looking. I was intentionally looking for that. And you're right. There's so many, like, it's, you know, because the PFD is not as cute. You know, I like that, like, you know, there's different brands now that are coming out with, first of all, more paddle friendly PFDs, you know, with the armhole, so you're not getting the chafing, you know. And you know, some are coming out with the race vest that have the option for the water bladder and all that. So they're coming out with cute colors and stuff. So, you know, thankfully they're making it more appealing now. But I found it so interesting that I not really looked at it with that eye before. And thankfully I did see quite a few leashes at least, but yeah, I definitely didn't see many PFDs, unfortunately. And that's something that we always emphasize, you know, in my business, I don't let anybody go out on that, you know. And you're welcome to bring your own PFD if you're more comfortable with your own, totally fine, but it's mandatory. Like that's a non sequitur. And so yeah, so I guess going with that, like, let's talk a little bit about PFDs and leashes, and maybe we can do, you know, kind of PFDs and then leashes.
Okay.
And first of all, I guess, you know, options, because there's definitely a variety of price points out there. I mean, I got a bunch for my business. I mean, they were like $27 each or so. I mean, there's definitely are affordable options that are Coast Guard approved. And yeah, so let's talk about that, the PFDs first, options, why it's important, and then we'll segue to the leashes.
Okay. Let me broaden this out just for a second. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you get, as the SUP guru in Traverse City, I'm sure you get this question, you know, at least a couple of times a week. I know I get it a couple of times a week. What's the best board to get? What's the best life jacket to get? What's the best leash to get? And my standard joke is, just like my underwear, depends. So I'm old. It's an old boomer joke, but so everything really starts and ends with goals. So I mean, what are your goals? If you think you might want to race a stand-up paddleboard, you're going to need to lean toward a 12.6 or a 14-foot board. If you want to surf on the board predominantly, then you don't want a 14-foot board. If you just want to mess around on a lazy river, you know, one board's going to be more appropriate than another board. So start with, you know, what am I going to use it for? What are my end goals? And the same thing with life jackets. Where am I going to be? What's a real assessment of my swimming ability? What kind of water am I going to be on? What's the temperature of the water that I'm going to be on? Are there any currents, anything like that? So for example, this is my, it's called the Class 5 life jacket. It's a Swiftwater Rescue life jacket. It actually has a belt that goes around the entire jacket. That's separate from the jacket. And if I get into trouble, I can, find it where it's at here. I can quickly release the life jacket, release the strap. So I would hook my leash to the back. There's a D-ring.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Back of the life jacket. And this is what I would use if I was doing a swiftwater rescue with the fire department and I was tethered to shore, which is a dangerous thing to do in a current. And if I got into trouble, I could always pull on this red ball and it would release the life jacket. The strap would come through
from the leash.
You can see, yeah, would come through the D-ring.
Yeah.
And
oh, cool.
Yeah. And so I would, so that's what I would wear if I was going down a rapids. You know, we got guys now on stand-up paddle boards going down Class 5 rapids, and you know, you need something like that. When it's cold this time of year, no matter where I'm paddling, even when I'm paddling on the small calm local lake, I wear an intrinsically buoyant life jacket because I don't want to have to deal with pulling any cords or doing anything else. If I fall into 39, 40 degree water, I want to be floating. I don't want to have to do anything because the water is just so incapacitating. So this is what I wear in the winter. Actually, I just bought brand new high visibility,
that's
high
cool.
float, life jacket that has got just a little bit more buoyancy. And again, it's intrinsically buoyant. I don't have to do anything for it. I'll wear this in big water all year around. I'll wear this in cold weather, regardless of my ability. And then you get to.
So let me interrupt you real quick,
Sure.
Bobby. So now my friend and I had a conversation, one of my paddle buddies, about the inflatables versus the I like that term, intrinsically buoyant. I just learned something new right now. I knew I would today. So I just lost my train of thought. That's what happens when you get old.
Your friend and you were talking about inflatables.
Oh yeah. So the inflatable versus the intrinsically buoyant. So now he had heard that in some temperatures that the inflatables will actually not inflate. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. All right.
I mean, they're pretty simple.
Okay.
In that they have a CO2 cartridge.
Yes.
In them.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what would cause
it not to inflate. Okay.
Yeah, you pull the little ripcord. It's like a parachute. Yeah. Don't use it unless you need it.
And, I have the waist pack too.
Yeah, and then it inflates. So I'm not aware of that. I will certainly look into it.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you're a non-swimmer, an inflatable life jacket isn't going to be of much help
you.
Because again, in that panic, you fall into the water. Now you're panicking. We talked about that inability to wave. You're solely focused on keeping your head above the water. So drowning victims tend to push down on the water, either one hand at a time or both hands together. They can't then reach down to their waist and inflate that life jacket, because doing so causes them to sink. And as soon as their airway goes underwater, they go back to that instinctive drowning response, which is something that Dr. Frank Pia named back in the 1960s. So
you're not, so in other words, you're not going to have that response to go, oh, hey, I need to pull my
exactly. You're going to immediately panic and try to save yourself from drowning. But if you're a good swimmer, if you have swimming ability, then yeah, and the water's warm, then yes, an inflatable life jacket is a tremendous benefit to have. There are several times. This is my warm weather kayaking vest. I have a surf ski, which is like a big long sit on top kayak, and
the Magnum PI vehicle.
Oh, you're aging yourself there. Yeah.
And Magnum PI also does that, so I can like kind of skate under that.
Oh, does he really? I haven't seen the Magnum PI.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, this is and this is actually a company, I think in Wisconsin. It's a Midwest company that created
awesome.
This. It's thin. It's really lightweight. It's really a fantastic device. And and then of course, people will argue, well, oh, you don't look as good with a life jacket on, or it's not visibly appealing. I've heard manufacturers.
You don't look good dead either.
Right. So you can't tell me that somebody wearing this, it doesn't affect your tan lines, unless you're a nudist. It doesn't get in your way at all. I don't think you can still see, somebody's body type, and you can see their abs. And I don't think there's any reason not to wear a life jacket.
Yes.
Of the
nice plug for West Marine too.
Well, yeah, sorry. And I'm not, I'm not
I'm just kidding.
I'm not compensated by anybody. In full disclosure.
But if you want to send me some free merch.
Yeah. But again, the important thing is buy what you're going to wear, buy what fits where you're at. And I can't emphasize enough the difference between wearing your life jacket and not wearing your life jacket. Of the more than 1,000 drownings that we've categorized on the Great Lakes, less than 15 were wearing life jackets.
Wow.
Yeah. Many of
Wow.
them had life jackets on the craft, but didn't had it on
Not
their
on their
body.
body
Think, well, oh, I'll just put it on,
if I'm
while
drowning. Yeah.
when I get in trouble. And that's like thinking that you're going to be able to put your seatbelt on in the middle of a car crash,
Right.
right? The seatbelt's there. If I start to get in trouble, I'll just put it on. Well, no, if your car is tumbling down the road, there's no way that you can put your life jacket on. If you step off the back of your stand-up paddleboard
Yeah.
and your 2,200-liter paddleboard buoyancy gets kicked away in the wind, your
Yeah.
little 25
Which can happen
pound,
big time.
right, yeah, your little 25-pound life jacket, attached, bungee corded on the nose of the board, is absolutely no help whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that's why, and in many ways, many respects, if you're a good swimmer in warm water, a leash is more important than the life jacket, because the leash
Yeah.
is going to keep you with the board, and the board will be able to get you back where you need to go. Whereas if you fall into the middle of Grand Traverse Bay, there's you probably enough boat traffic, but there are times of the year when you could be out there for a long time. And the water tends to be cold, so hypothermia becomes an issue. A leash and a life jacket is the ideal. I always wear a leash and a life jacket unless I'm surfing, and then I wear a leash.
So, with I guess I want to talk about cold water, a little bit too, since we were kind of going there, and then we'll go to the leashes a little bit as well. But so right now, obviously, I mean, we're just coming off of winter, and we're kind of having wintry weather here in Michigan. But the water's going to be cold for a while. I mean, realistically, it doesn't really get warm until July.
Yep.
So what are your recommendations, or I don't even know if recommendations is the right word, but what to give people an idea of the importance of that PFD, and maybe talk about a little bit about the hypothermia aspect.
Yep. And there are some myths about hypothermia too. And again, going back to people will say, well, should I wear a wetsuit? Should I wear a dry suit? What should I wear? And again, the answer is depends. Where are you going to be? Who are you going to be with? So take a minute and evaluate your ability. What's the likelihood of you falling off? 80% of drownings across the board are people who never intended to be in the water in the first place. Stand-up paddleboarders never. I mean, when I go surfing, I plan to fall off. But if I'm paddling my local lake, I don't plan on falling off. So I don't need a life jacket or a leash, right? Because I'm not gonna fall off. But the reality is, it happens, and so decide where you're going to be and what you're going to be doing, and make your choices kind of from there. Water temperature plays a big part, but at the same time, you need to worry about some other factors. So a lot of my kayaking friends are huge on dry suits. You got to wear a dry suit. You got to, and in a dry suit, it's basically like a Ziploc bag. It's sealed at the neck and sealed at the cuffs of the wrists and the cuffs of the ankle, and you wear clothing underneath it that stays dry, and so it insulates you. And a wetsuit acts by trapping water against your skin, and your body warms up that water, and the wetsuit holds it there and also helps to insulate it. So there are times, this weekend downstate is supposed to be 80 degrees, and the water temperature is still in the low 40s. And there will be lots of people out on the water, and that poses a special problem in that if I'm in a dry suit and I'm paddling in 80 degrees, there's a problem with me overheating. Even in my wetsuit. So you have to balance the risk. There are times when I paddle in the winter on the river, and I don't wear either a wetsuit or a dry suit. What in the world? You're the safety guy. If I'm paddling in the middle of winter and it's 20 degrees or so, I'm going to wear like cross-country ski type clothing, and I'm going to take with me a dry bag that has a towel and a change of clothes in it. and I'm on a slow river that's in a right in the downtown Lansing area. So I'm never more than 100 yards from where I need to be. I have a life jacket on, I have a leash on. So if I fall into the water, yes, it's going to be miserable, but I'm attached to my board. I'm going to be on shore within a couple of minutes. I'm going to dry myself off. I'm going to put those dry clothes that I have on, and my day is over.
So that brings up a really good point too, Bobby, is that I always tell people, don't paddle out further, especially if you're paddling by yourself. Don't paddle out further than you can swim in, because that is going to be bad if you and a lot of people are just like and I'm like, no, really, because if you fall off, like, you don't know what's you need to swim back. You need to get
Right.
back if you're too pooped to paddle, or you can't stay on your board because it's too choppy. Like,
well, we want everybody to
you may have to surf style paddle back.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of things there. That's great advice. But also remind them, if you have a leash and a life jacket, you don't need to be a great swimmer. I'm not saying you need to go out, past where your comfort level is, where your safety level is, but that's why a leash is so important. Because if you fall off the board, Fred Flintstone style, whoop, 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 and you kick the board 20, 30 yards away, if there's a wind and it's moving in that direction, you may not be able to catch that board. So that's why a leash is so important. And stay with your board, paddle your board back, like you said. Put your paddle underneath your chest with the handle up in the air, not the other way around, where the bent shaft, if you lay on it, is gonna break. So so put it. I don't know how to do this. Make it look like that.
I know what you mean. Put the blade by your head.
Forward and up out of the water.
Yes.
Not pushing down into the water. And then you can paddle it like a surfboard. We haven't talked about offshore winds yet, but that's a huge problem. And you're much more capable of paddling in a stiff wind against the wind by kneeling on the board or laying down on the board than you are standing up and letting the wind kind of continue to push you back. But so
and I've
again,
had to do that. It's not fun.
We all have. We all have.
Bloody feet later. Like
So again, know your ability, know where you're paddling, know what the water temperatures are, and make good decisions based on those. And if you're unaware, go out and try it out. My surf ski, the surf ski instructors that I've been to, we would start every day with 10 remounts, and we'd end every day with 10 remounts, getting back up on the board. And that's something that everybody should do with a stand-up paddleboard. When you first get it, if you get a new board, you need to learn where the balance points are. You need to, am I physically able to climb up the side of this board, or do I need to kind of shinny up it like a ladder? Is it easy to climb on top of? How many? I always encourage people, how many people will your board float? Because it makes a tremendous rescue device. And just real quickly, because I know we're not talking about rescue in this session, but always keep your board between you and the victim. Drowning victims are panicked. They will grab hold of you and pull you under. If you put your board between them, they will grab hold of the board and they will try to push the board under, and it won't go, and everybody will kind of be safer.
Stay safe.
But practice.
That's an awesome
practice
point.
all of those things.
That's great. So I guess that gives us a good segue into leashes, since we talked a little bit about that. And I think honestly, there's been confusion for me in the past. And I've been told varied things and about different leashes, but one of the things, like the majority of leashes that I have, pretty much all of the leashes that I have are coil leashes. I have one straight leash, and that's basically in case I want to surf. But you can maybe tell me if either one works well, what's appropriate for what situation, kind of about that situational awareness factor, like lake versus river, rapids, that kind of thing, where
Yeah,
there might be
absolutely.
some debris, all that.
Yeah.
And surf too.
The first and most important thing is to have a leash. And then the second most important thing is to have the correct leash. And again, it depends. Where are you going to be using the leash? What are you going to be using the leash for? And that's my puppy. I don't know if you can hear him.
We love dogs.
This is a straight leash. This is a leash that I use when I'm surfing. This one has a big cuff that can go on my shin rather than on my ankle. Makes it just keeps it out of the way just a little bit. This is better for surfing, and the reason is because a coil leash will have a springy effect. So if I
smack you,
so this is a great idea if you're on flat water and you don't want to have you only want to have one leash. This is a fine leash to have. Disadvantages of this leash is that it will drag in the water behind the board and can pick up seaweed and debris and really slow you down. The leash.
So this would be the most ideal for surfing.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yes. So the straight leash, everybody, most ideal for surfing. And
also,
the main
also
reason
works
you
fine.
stated was that way the coil won't coil the board back into your head when you're surfing.
Right. Now, if this is all you have and you're just going to paddle around the lake, and rather than choosing not to wear one, wear this and
better than nothing.
Yeah, you can take, and this is something that a friend of mine showed me years and years ago. Just take it and put a little loop in the back of your swimsuit, so that it stays out of the water. And then
so it won't pick up stuff.
Yeah, if you do fall off the board, it will pop out of your shorts or out of your swimsuit, and it'll just be the regular leash, but that will keep it. Or you can coil it up and step on it while you're paddling if you don't want it to go right underneath your feet. And this is a coiled leash. Again, it's got a little springy thing, so it tends to stay on the board. This one also has a cuff that's a little bit bigger than an ankle cuff. I recently moved, so I couldn't find my other leash. I have another coiled leash that has a quick release on it.
Nice.
A problem with all leashes in some place where there's a current, like a river, especially a fast moving river, or even in the ocean, if there's a heavy tide, is that the leash can get snagged on something. And that's a really bad scenario in current, because we've had fatalities where people have been paddling and their board goes in one direction and their body goes in another direction. You can get into trouble. So if I was paddling and this is around my ankle, and this is attached to the board, and the board goes shooting off this way, and there's a stump from a tree. Now I'm on one side of the stump and the board's on the other side of the stump, and the current is pulling me away from the stump. The board's also being pulled on the other side of the stump. So now I have to, if I want to get this off, I have to be able to do a hanging crunch, reach my ankle or reach my calf. So they make them, again, with that quick release device like I have on my Type 5 life jacket. So if I attached it to a waist belt and could easily get rid of the waist belt, it will keep that entrapment from becoming a possibility. So know where you're going to paddle, know the conditions that you're going to paddle in, know what your own physical conditions are, and choose it. If you're going to get into this sport, like you are into this sport, like I'm into this sport, you're going to need a couple of boards, you're going to need a couple of leashes, you're going to need a couple of paddles, and a couple of life jackets.
Yeah. And so rather than not wearing a leash in a situation like a rapid or current river with debris in it, quick release leash, invest in that if that's your favorite paddling situation.
And practice with it.
Yeah. I've never paddled in that.
I've done a couple of rivers.
Yeah, I've never done that.
It's a completely different animal. It's a lot of fun.
But you'd have to, I wouldn't want to do it by myself. I'd be
No. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd want to go with a guide. Yeah. Well, okay, that's cool, because I've heard, like I said, I've heard so many different things, and but always the one good advice that I've heard with that is situational awareness is key, which is definitely true. So thank you. That was really good info. And
let me just
yeah,
tell a real quick story here.
Please.
There was a picture in one of the major stand-up paddleboard magazines, and it was of a professional paddler during a race, and this is how she attached her leash to her board.
Okay, around her PFD. All right.
So I want you to think for a second, what's going to happen if I have to deploy this life jacket?
Not going to inflate.
First of all, it was worn with the pack in the back. I don't have a huge problem with that. If you're going to wear it, it's ideally in the front so that you can reach it really quickly. If you're a really good swimmer in relatively warm water, putting it around to your back is not the biggest mistake that you can make. But realize that now you're going to have to spin it back around your waist in order to deploy it. But this is just completely unacceptable. If you got into trouble and you attempted to deploy this, it's not going to deploy at all.
Right.
It's going to deploy, but it's going to be entrapped by this. And now, even if you do fall into water, now your buoyancy is on your backside, and your face can still be in the water. You're going to have to work to keep your head above the water. So I just wanted to point that out. Please don't do that. Please think through some of these choices that you're making.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I'll just leave it at okay. So I want to talk a little bit too, since we're talking about different water situations. We just talked about a river. So let's talk a little bit about ocean versus lake versus river a little bit.
I love this question. And
I'll tell you a quick story, very short story. Is my husband and I, when we got married, we went to 6 months after our wedding, we went on our honeymoon to Maui, and
nice.
And I took surf lessons, which was so fun. And I was glad I was able to do it, because I was like a couple months pregnant and I was sick as a dog. It was terrible. But I was glad I was able to surf. Right. So anyway, we're learning to surf, and I was so fascinated because I'm used to fresh water. I was so fascinated that when we even got close to like the rocks and the water was more shallow, we were buoyant. And my husband is I'm small, I'm like 5'3", and my husband is like 6'3" and like 200 and some pounds. I mean, he's a big guy, and he was even buoyant on the he fell off. And so that salt water, and I was thinking about it, I was like, dang, if we were in fresh water, dude, you would have been toast right there. Sure. So it's, so that, even that difference, because the salt makes you more buoyant. And that's a fun little sciencey physics thing.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the differences there, because that is so important for people to be aware of, I think. In that regard.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to do are to bring water people from the ocean to the Great Lakes and watch their reaction the first time they see Lake Michigan or Lake Ontario, or and any one of the Great Lakes. They are they're amazed. I mean, we call them lakes, but they really are much more like inland seas. Hang on just a
Yes.
second. I'm going to have you meet my dog.
Oh, cool.
Come on up. Come on up. Up.
Hi, buddy.
What do you think, Paco? Oh my goodness. There was a squirrel outside, so he was all messed up. Okay, good boy. Good boy. Good boy.
Name. What's his name?
Paco. Paco.
Paco. Oh,
Paco with a P.
I love it. Hola,
So,
Paco.
So we're
right.
talking about the ocean versus the lake. I love bringing
Yes.
people. We had the International Surf Lifesaving Association, a bunch of lifeguards from California and the East Coast, Cape Hatteras, come and do a training session. It was the first time they'd ever been to the Great Lakes, and we took them down to the beach, and they look up.
Yeah.
What in the world? And then we take them out in the water, and it's not salty like they expect. And like you said, the buoyancy is a
like
little
it
bit
doesn't
less.
taste the
So,
same. Yeah.
no, yeah. And so people tend to disrespect the lakes because it's just a lake. I think that in and of itself is one of the reasons that people don't take drowning on the Great Lakes seriously, is that it is far closer to an ocean than it is a lake. And and then it has some particular problems. And I actually was lucky enough to go to Australia to present at the International Rip Current Symposium about the differences between ocean swell and Great Lakes waves, because we really don't have much true swell here. And people think, oh, Maui, you went to Maui, Maui is really, really scary, really, really dangerous. And there's an argument to be made that the Great Lakes are just as dangerous, in some respects more dangerous. The lower half of Lake Michigan has been cited as one of the 7 deadliest places to swim. I think it was National Geographic magazine did a piece on that, and there's some differences between Great Lakes waves and ocean waves that make the lakes problematic. And so I'll try to highlight a couple of them. You mentioned one, buoyancy. I think it's about 9%. So it's not a tremendous amount, but yes, your board's more buoyant and your body is more buoyant in the fresh water. So you have that kind of going against you. The biggest issue is true swell. When you were in Maui, if you were on the north shore of Maui, then the waves are generated up in Alaska with big storms up in the Arctic Circle that create these waves. And once a wave train starts, it just continues to go. It has its own energy, so it doesn't need that wind to keep it moving. In the Great Lakes, because there's the longest stretch in Lake Michigan is 307 miles. From top to bottom, 307 miles. From side to side, at its widest, is 118 miles. So we don't get any true swell. We don't have a swell coming from the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, 2,000 miles away. If it's coming, it's, if the wind's out of the north, it's coming from up in your neck of the woods to down, in the Chicago area. And as a result, it's if the wind stops, the waves stop generally. In a little bit of time. The other thing that happens is our waves become much closer together. A wave moving 2,000 miles has a chance to get to join other waves and build itself
energy,
up. And the energy combines. Here on the Great Lakes, we don't have that luxury. It doesn't happen. So the waves are much closer together. We call that wave period, the time from one crest to the other crest, or one trough to the other trough. And the last time I was surfing in California at San Onofre was 6 foot at 14 seconds. What that means is it's a 6 foot wave. It's head high wave. It's a fun. That's about my limit. I'll windsurf in waves bigger than that, but I don't typically.
Not a big wave guy.
No, I wish I was. But they scare me. And
I am in my dreams.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But the way when I fell, I had 12 seconds to collect myself, 14 seconds to collect myself, catch my breath, get ready for the next wave, take a deep breath, duck under the water, climb back on the board, 12 seconds to, to move along to get out where I need to. In the Great Lakes, it's not unusual for us to have, we occasionally get 6-foot waves and bigger waves. I've never seen a 12-second period on any of the Great Lakes. I have seen 8. 8 is like nirvana. 8-second swell, 6 foot at 8 seconds is like the best day of the decade. And in California or Hawaii, people wouldn't even go because it's such a lousy day. But our most of our incidents, our rescues and our drownings happen in the Great Lakes when the waves are 3 to 5 feet, but the period is also 3 to 5 seconds. So what happens is you get hit with a smaller wave, but you don't have time to recover from it. You get hit with another wave and you pop up and you try to catch your breath and and you duck under the wave and you pop up. Here comes another wave. And it's just this constant, it's not a huge
hammering.
It's not a huge, powerful punch, but it's this little punch that just keeps beating you down and beating you down and beating you down over and over and over again in such a much shorter period of time. Paddling out, it's hysterical to see really good surfers who are used to being, having that 14, 15, 16 second to paddle between waves, and they duck dive underneath the waves. Now they're duck diving and they come up, they can't even get a paddle in.
Because you're not even, you're
right.
You gotta...
It is right there. So our waves tend to be smaller, but they tend to be much closer together, and it's the cumulative effect that makes it much more difficult for everything. Paddling out, if I'm paddling out at San Onofre, if I time it right, I may not have to duck under a single wave. I catch it during a little bit of a lull. I paddle really, really hard, get over one, and then get through the breaking wave area before I get hit with another wave. In the Great Lakes, most of the time, if we're surfing, we walk down the pier because paddling out is just, it's far more difficult. And we can talk about currents too, because we'll use those, and those are a much bigger issue on the Great Lakes than they are on the ocean. In California, for example, the piers are open structures. They have great big poles, and they're driven down, but the water can flow through it. On the Great Lakes, all of our structures are solid structures, and as a result, the wave hits the structure and then bounces off the structure with almost the same amount of energy. So if a 4-foot wave hits the pier, a 3-foot wave is gonna bounce back off the pier and go toward the next 4-foot wave that's coming in and hit that, and then continue on and hit the next one that's coming in, and that wave is going to hit the pier and bounce off. And this pier bounce that we get is just incredible. Creates a huge, big problem. And simply knowing, for example, the wind direction. And we haven't talked about it, but offshore winds are a tremendous danger to stand-up paddleboarders. If the wind is blowing away from shore, if you're in Traverse City, in the city, and the wind's blowing out of the south, and you go out on your stand-up paddleboard, before you know it, you're going to be a quarter mile out, a half mile out, moving toward Mission Peninsula. And the farther you get away from shore, the stronger the wind is, because it's no longer blocked by those buildings and dunes, and the bigger the waves are. And eventually you're going to have to turn around, and you're going to have to paddle back in against that. Now in the open water of the lake, when the wind is out of the south, we'll use Traverse City again. If you're up, I'm trying to think of some of it. If you're up in Northport, for people who know, Traverse City is a peninsula, and it's got beautiful bay, runs north to south, I don't know, 10 miles. And
probably,
so if the wind is blowing out of the south, the water is being pushed toward the north, being pushed up toward Northport and Mission Point. And so you just need to be aware of that. When it hits the structure up there, it needs to go out and around the structure. If you're paddling in Grand Haven and the wind is out of the north, then the north side of the pier is going to have that pier bounce. The waves are going to hit the pier and bounce off of it. The south side of the pier is going to be clear because there's no waves there. The pier has stopped the waves from going, and you're going to need to go down, half mile in order to even get a wave.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but I I drove out to I drove north to Sutton's Bay to meet Keith, and
Sure.
yeah, and
Keith Conway. Hi, Keith.
Yeah. I went to say hey to him and take some of my rat cards to the Sutton's Bay bikes. And so it was fascinating.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, right. Go to Sutton's Bay bikes. But they're great people there, and Keith knows his stuff, and so yeah, we paddle together sometimes, and we've trained with the same paddle coach. And so anyway, I went over there to chat with him, and I was observing the water as I was driving. And for those of you guys who don't know, that M22 is all along the west arm of Grand Traverse Bay. And when I got to, well, of course, Sutton's Bay is it's the bay, Sutton's Bay, but when we were still at West Bay, it was calm as calm could be. And then as I came back further into Traverse City, and it was interesting, I actually witnessed the Coast Guard helicopter. I don't know if they were practicing rescues. I was hoping they weren't actually rescuing someone, but they were low, and I could see the spray of water. I was like, what the heck is that? But then I saw it was the helicopter, and so I was hoping they were just practicing and not actually rescuing someone. But yeah, but anyway, but on the way, then I got about, I don't know, to halfway to Traverse City, and there was a nice little roll of the wave coming toward shore. But then you get a little further toward Traverse City around Clinch Park, and it was just crazy chop nuts, and got to the senior center, and there was a little roll of the waves towards shore, but you look out a little further and it was just tumultuous. But it was just fascinating. I mean, it's like 20 miles to Sutton's Bay. Like, I mean, just in the short, 5-mile segments.
I don't think it's that far.
Probably, yeah, maybe not even that much. Yeah. But just in those maybe 3 to 5 mile segments, there was such a difference in the water behavior.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
And it's something it's something to note, even there, because we can look at the water, in one spot, or even down to Bryant Park could be totally different than it is in Clinch Park. And that's just maybe 2 miles, 3 miles,
right.
Not even. So maybe let's talk about that in terms of current too and wind direction.
So if you want to surf, if you want to stand up paddle surf, if you want to windsurf, if you want to, even if you're just stand up paddleboarding, you need to pay a lot of attention to the weather. And if this is the, Traverse City's down here at the bottom, and this is the West Bay, if the wind is in this direction, the waves are going to come down and hit here, but it's also going to cause a ripple effect on the shoreline here. If the wind is in this direction, we've only moved it, a matter of maybe 5 degrees or so, changes the whole dynamic of what's happening. If we change it 5 degrees in the other direction, and now it changes that whole dynamic even more. So if the wind is in this direction, you're going to get waves that are hitting the shore. You're going to get a long shore current that's running down the peninsula toward Traverse City. If the wind is in this direction, the longshore current is going to be coming at an angle, and it will be much less strong here than it is over on the opposite side. So, and the weather in Michigan, it changes every 5 minutes. And so if you're out paddling and the wind is in this direction, and you decide, I'm going to go paddling over right here, and the wind shifts now to this direction, now you're in a completely different environment. So look at the forecast and see, and if the wind tends to clock when we have storms. So and there are times when we started a race years ago and started in Traverse City, went out to Bowers Harbor, if you're familiar with that, and that's on the West Bay too. Yeah. And so we started and the wind was in this direction, and it was light, like 5 miles an hour or so. And then over the first 15 minutes of the race, it turned into this direction at about 10 miles. And it was, we were literally paddling on one side to try and keep the board straight. 100 strokes. And then you go, oh, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to do 2 strokes on the other side. And you paddle 2 strokes on the other side, and your board go, you got caught in the wind. Yeah, wah wah. But yeah,
Yeah.
you need to be kind of a amateur meteorologist and start paying attention to that, and know where that, you know, if you're going to surf, know where the little nooks and crannies are, because like I said, the best surf, if this is we'll make this Lake Michigan, in the bottom end of Lake Michigan, and up here is Sheboygan, which is a fantastic place to surf on the Great Lakes.
Oh, cool.
Believe it or not, the best wind is not one that's on shore, because that creates those really close together waves with no period to get out. So the best wind is about like this for Sheboygan,
Okay.
because the water is pushed down and the water always refracts toward shore, because the waves always break almost directly on shore. So the wind coming at side shore, or even a little bit side offshore, will actually produce waves there. And then if there's a structure like a pier on the lee side, the downwind side of the structure, the waves will wrap around that and become the cleanest. The windward side, if this is a pier, the waves bounce off the pier and hit the next wave that's coming in, and you got a whole big jumbled mess. So
wow.
It's fascinating.
There's so much there.
Oh, there is.
It is. It's and well, and even yesterday, I just went out to, we live near Silver Lake, really nice inland lake. It's on All Sport Lake, and we have like our subdivision has like a little shared access, and so it's finally thawed. I went out there, and it wasn't that windy yesterday, supposedly. And there's like across from our little shared access, there's a little island, so sometimes it offers a little protection from the wind. But I went out there, and it was the wind was parallel to the shore. So if you're going this way, you know, it's side chop. So I tried to go with the direction. So I was doing some like upwind downwind kind of sprints a little bit, and but it was fascinating, because even within, I don't know, I probably paddled for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe almost. And just within that short amount of time, it changed several times. And even on this little lake, and I mean, doing you know, we were just talking about like doing the upwind. Sometimes it's like, holy cow. And I was mostly on one side, and I'm like, you know, but then downwind, it's like, yay, I get a break. And
unfortunately, that you spend so much time going upwind. You spend like, you know, and the stronger the wind, the worse it is. You may spend like 45 minutes beating yourself up going into the wind, and then you turn around, and 10 minutes later
you're like,
you're right back where you were. Yeah,
but then you got to get back.
Right.
Then you got to get back. And so, you know, I was making sure I wasn't going too far, so that I knew I wouldn't have to kill myself to get back. So that's why I was like going down, turning around, going down. But there were times then all of a sudden the wind would stop. The water was like glass. So then it's like this relatively easy paddle either way. I mean, there's a little more effort when the water's like glass, because you don't have anything to kind of carry you. But even that, it's like, okay, you have to think of like, how far am I going to be able to paddle downwind? You know, you're going to get there really fast to your destination, but how am I going to be able to have the energy and effort to paddle back to shore? And am I going to be able to handle the side chop when I need to turn into it? You know, am I going to be able to stay on my board? And I think a lot of people don't always consider that.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, and the strength and energy and effort it takes, because it's easy to get tired really fast.
Right. And I try not to tell a lot of war stories, but I think this one is kind of appropriate, because I was at Warren Dunes in southern Lake Michigan, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. One of my favorite places to go. It's got a beautiful beach. And as I was swimming, I noticed a paddleboarder, and it was flat calm, because the wind was blowing offshore. So the wind's blowing from the east to the west, which is an unusual thing that happens in the Great Lakes. But it was relatively calm, and I'm swimming along, and all of a sudden I saw a stand-up paddleboarder out way farther than I was comfortable watching them. And I saw them fall off their board several times and then climb back on. Yeah. And so I immediately ran to my truck and grabbed my stand up and paddled out. And by then they were probably, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile offshore or so. And this middle-aged gentleman was sitting on his board at the time. And I paddled up to him and said, "Hey, how's it going?" He goes, "Oh, okay, I'm just taking a little rest." I said, "Well, you know," and I had to be really careful because I tend to like proselytize when I'm out at the beach, and I don't want to come as like I know it all, and I'm and I'm going to come and tell you what to do. So I'm at least being a little bit sensitive. I said, "Well, the longer you sit on your board, the closer you are to Chicago, and at that part of Lake Michigan and Michigan, you can actually see the skyline of Chicago."
Yeah,
I said, "That's Chicago." I said, "If you
that's
notice
the
wind," exactly. And he goes, "Oh my goodness!" And I said, "So we need to turn around." I said, and he left, and it was perfectly flat, calm. The wind was relatively light, probably 5 miles an hour, because it was blocked by there's a great big dune there in front of Warren Dunes, and great big trees and everything. So if you paddled right along shore, it would have been a glorious paddle. Now he didn't even realize it, and before he knows it, he's a mile offshore, and he ended up on his knees for a while paddling, and then when he had trouble balancing that way because he was getting tired, he laid down and put the paddle underneath his chest and paddle it like a surfboard. And by the end of I got to lecture him the whole way in about the importance of leashes and the importance of life jackets. And he had a life jacket attached. He had a life jacket attached to the nose of the board. It was a rented board, and nobody at the place that rented it gave him any clue whatsoever as to where to go or what to watch out for or anything like that. Yeah, it's just so frustrating. But we ended up getting he put the life jacket on, and he did have a leash on. So yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's how tragedies happen. People just don't know what they don't know, and somebody unscrupulous who is only after making a buck doesn't take the time to explain to them, where the best place to go is, what the conditions might be like, what to do if you get in trouble, and he's all by himself.
Yeah. So. Oh my gosh. Well, and I have to say that, even like, here's how I feel too with that, is that even sometimes, like, when you're you're all excited, you're on vacation or whatever, you're just going out for a day, like somebody inundating you with a lot of information. I mean, it's hard to retain all that. Yep. I mean, honestly, too. And and I think, even if they did give him that information, how much of it did he actually retain? You know what I'm saying? So exactly. Sometimes places do that, but it's like, unless you like have a lesson and you put it into practice, and you got it in your body as well as your brain, and you put it into action and you practice those actions or techniques, you don't learn it, which is why I chose for my business model, because we have a lot of great rental places in town. And some of them do a really good job of giving a quick instruction on how to hold the paddle and things like that. But for me, I chose because I'm passionate.
I'm laughing because all the beginners turn the paddle around the opposite way.
They hold the blade wrong. Everybody does that. Yeah, it's not intuitive. But that's why I chose, because I'm passionate about teaching. I've been a fitness instructor forever, and I'm passionate about proper form, proper biomechanics, and safety, to prevent injury, when you're able to. I mean, we all get injured, and that's just life. But if you can prevent, there are preventable things. And so I'm passionate about people knowing what they're doing, and I like teaching lessons, especially for kids, but adults too. Like, I had a friend who took lessons from me, and she wanted to take lessons because she was afraid to go past like the swimming buoys. And she's like, my goal is to get past the swimming buoys, to get over my fear and to feel confident, and so we helped her do that and things like that.
That's a great example of why males drown 4 times more often than females. because the guys are like, I'm not going to swim to just past the swim buoys. I'm going out to, what is that, Red 17, the buoy in the middle
The
of,
red buoy, yeah.
yeah,
Buoy.
I'm going out
Yeah.
to the red buoy, and I mean, and it happens in swimming too. I'm gonna swim out to the swim buoy.
Yeah.
If I'm, and I am a guy, if I think, oh, I can lift 300, I can deadlift 300 pounds, and I put 300 pounds on the bar, right? And I go to deadlift 300 pounds, and I can't even get it off the ground. Oh well, that's too bad. But if I think, oh, I can swim out to, to that red buoy, and I get halfway out there and realize I can't do it, that becomes life-threatening.
Yes. Yeah.
So the male mentality that I can do this, and if we don't instruct people, if you're running a business and you're renting out these boards, you need to explain to these people just real basic type stuff. I can tell you of several drownings where, rather than I want to paddle 10 miles. Okay, if you want to paddle 10 miles in Traverse City and the wind is blowing out of the west, paddle from the park at the right by Traverse City up to Sutton's Bay and back, because you're in the protected side of that thing, right? Don't paddle over on the over by the Milk Crate Hotel, the Grand Traverse Hotel, because the wind's blowing onshore there. It's a much different situation. Or don't paddle straight out, into the lake. From along shore,
don't.
If you get into trouble, you're only 100 yards from shore. This time of year, if the weather's lousy, I will paddle where I can see the bottom.
Yes. Yeah, that's what we did all winter. Is we because obviously the only places that weren't frozen over was the bay, and even once you get into January, February, it was there was sometimes we couldn't even enter the water, but yeah, we swam.
Swimming is the same thing.
It was so fun to swim in the freezing cold water. No, we paddled. We paddled, along the shoreline, and we all, we stayed really close, and sometimes the water was really shallow, especially on East Bay. Holy cow, we were like, dang, we're hitting the bottom, so we'd have to go out a little bit further because the water levels were really low.
Look for those big rocks.
Yeah, exactly. We were like, holy cow, don't hit that. And but yeah, and because we knew, like, the water is really cold, we don't want to go in. I'm not trying, we're not trying to get caught. We wanted to enjoy our paddle, get a good workout, and make it back. And so, and that's the thing too, I think, planning ahead. Okay, if I go to this point, so let's maybe talk about that too, is like knowing like how far to go, like how far you need to go to know how far you got to get back, so what, like, I guess thinking about kind of devices you should have with you to help you with that. Like I have my Garmin, that'll tell me, how many miles I'm on. Like you can put your little SUP thing, but there's also lots of apps you can put on your phone, things like that, even ones that have like rescue flares, that'll tell, you say you put your friend's number, like I put my husband's number if I'm going out by myself, and it'll send a flare if I'm not back within 2 hours or whatever. And he'll call and check on me. It'll send him a flare. Sometimes it goes off on accident, which is annoying, but I'll be like, I'm okay.
Yeah. No, that's a great question.
Let's talk about those options for people too, for safety. And
so I paddle alone a lot because I don't have any friends, and
I don't believe that.
My schedule is just weird, and so there's a lot of times when I just pick up and go off and go by myself. So yeah, I mean, I always paddle along shore. I'm always very conscious of, any changes in the wind direction or any changes in that. I'm always very conscious of what the weather forecast is, because thunderstorms can blow up really, really quickly. And I tell you what, we can, especially in the summertime, in those dog days of summer, like in August, you get that real hazy and visibility's down to, maybe 3/4 of a mile or so. And everything is calm and flat and humid. and then a storm blows in
All
out
of
of
a sudden.
nowhere. Yeah. And you've got 40, 50 mile an hour winds and, hail. And so don't get caught unaware. Check the weather forecast before you go for your entire trip, and then some padded time, some extra time, so that you get into trouble.
What's your favorite weather app? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, I use
Wind
several.
I do too.
Right now I'm using one called Windy.
Yes, I love that one. Yeah.
Do you pay premium so you get it hourly, or you do the 3 hour blocks?
No, I think I have the free one.
Yeah, and I windsurf is another one that I use when I was windsurfing a lot.
Oh, okay.
And they have a premium thing that gives you more and forecasts and things like that. Recognize that if it's a sports person's app, and it's, for example, I windsurf is a windsurfing, kite surfing kind of thing, they're gonna tend to err on the side of being a little more windy than a little less windy.
Okay.
I think most of the television meteorologists don't really give a rip about the wind, and sometimes they'll say, "Oh, it's going to be really windy today," and the forecast is 10 to 15.
Yeah.
You're like, it's not really windy, and there are other times when they'll overestimate what the wind is going to be. So a lot of it is just learning how to read a weather map and what an isobar is, and that kind of thing. So
what about like the small craft warnings? What about those?
That's a good thing most of the time. And it gets back to another real pet peeve of mine, and that is the flags on the beach. Most of the beaches here in Michigan don't have lifeguards, unfortunately, which is the gold standard. They rely on beach flags, and I've never seen a beach flag ever rescue anybody. And
it's never ran out there and
ran
over somebody.
No. And they break it down into three categories, which I think is unfortunate. And there's so much more data that needs to go into something than just wave height and wind and things like that. So it's kind of a crapshoot. Just learn to know what where your reliable weathercasters are. And I forgot your question initially that started this
we were talking about just what are your favorite apps, kind of what and just weather and wind, and I don't remember either.
I mean yesterday I changed my whole schedule around because I thought I was going to go windsurfing for the first time this year. The forecast was 10 to 20, which is about the lower limit of fun windsurfing for me. So I changed a bunch of appointments that I had, and turns out that the wind never showed up, and so I didn't go. So be flexible and have a plan B and a plan C. I know what another thing we can talk a little bit about is equipment for different situations. If you're going to go paddle on the bay near town for a half hour, and you're just going to paddle back and forth just outside the swim area, you need a minimum of equipment. If you decide that you're going to paddle up over on the Lake Michigan side from, say, Frankfurt to Empire, like a 10-mile paddle, 15-mile paddle, maybe. I haven't measured it specifically, and I'm going to go alone. That's a completely different set of skill sets and equipment that I need. If I'm going to paddle big water alone, my wife knows exactly where I'm going, exactly when I plan to be back. I'm taking at least one form of communication with me. If the weather sounds kind of sketchy at all, I'm going to take a PLB, a personal locator beacon, which is just a little small hill. It's smaller than your cell phone. You get in trouble, you push a button, it sends a signal to the satellite, and then lets the Coast Guard know that that you're in trouble. Use it in big trouble. I know a lot of kayakers and a few stand-up paddleboarders that use a marine radio. Take a marine radio with them. So if they get in any trouble at all, they just go to, I think it's channel 6, and Channel 5 maybe, radio the Coast Guard that I'm in trouble. This is my last known location. This is the trouble that I'm having, and send some help. So take a second to think about what you're doing and where you're going to be, and what the possible ramifications are.
Yeah. Yeah. Huge. Yeah. Huge. That's awesome. And yeah, so I guess in most people that I encounter, except for people that would do like one of my fitness classes, most people are not experienced paddlers, or if they do, it's like, if they do paddle relatively regularly, they're people who, will just kind of putz around on the lake, leisurely. It's their recreational enjoyment. They just like to take in nature. It's relaxing to them. I guess what would you say is the most important thing for them to understand when they're going out? I mean, besides what we talked about, PFD, leash, I guess you're just talking about like the minimum of equipment or whatever. I mean, depending on how long you're planning on being out there, even if you're just putzing around, like you may want to, you need to make sure that you're hydrated. I would tell people you need to make sure you're hydrated. You need to make sure you've eaten enough. Those kinds of things to fuel the energy, the calories that you're burning. So what are some other things that maybe they might not think about? Like sunglasses, hat, even basic things. Sometimes people don't think about that.
Sure.
So yeah.
Sure. And again, it all comes back to, it all depends on what your goals are and what your, where you're at, what your skill level is, and so many different factors come into play. But yeah, if you're gonna, I lived for 2.5 years in Arizona, and the sun there is just as intense as can be. And I would get up first thing in the morning and lather on the sunscreen. I always wore a hat. I always wore a rash guard that would protect me from the sun. And so, think about those things. Now, if your goal is to get a suntan, recognize that the water reflecting the sunlight, right, is going to really intensify that normal sun, and you'll burn a lot faster.
Yes.
So even if you're fairly tan and you want to work on your tan, put some sunscreen on, because you might be out longer than you thought you were. The sun is a lot more intense because of the reflective property of it, and things like that. So absolutely, hydration becomes a big factor, especially if you're working hard paddling. And always take extra hydration, because the wind may change direction, and it was a little bit at your back, a little light wind at your back as you headed out, and you paddled up the bay, and then suddenly you turn around and the wind's picked up to 15 miles an hour, and you planned on being out for 45 minutes, and now it's going to be another 45 minutes just before you get back home. So just kind of be prepared, and it's always better to have something and not need it than to need something and not have it.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
While we're here, I've probably got one almost within
Over
arm's
my
reach,
notes,
but I'm not,
make sure I don't forget
sure
something.
where it is. But a really important thing for all paddlers and all watercraft people are that the Coast Guard makes. I'll send you a link so you can post a picture of it. A little sticker about this big. It's orange, and on it in Sharpie, you write your name and phone number and contact information of someone, so that if you fall off your board and you don't have a leash and your board ends up going, to shore, somebody can pick it up and call you if it just blew away from your cottage, or they can call the Coast Guard and say, I just found this board, and I don't know if somebody's out in the middle of the lake. It just makes things a lot easier. The way it started was surf ski, long skinny kayak, sit on top kayak from South Africa, washed ashore in the Caribbean.
Oh, wow.
And the Caribbean Coast Guard, I don't remember what country it was, but did a search for several days. And it turns out that this surf ski just got washed away from somebody's oceanfront property and traveled all the way to the Caribbean, and the person was fine.
Oh my
So
gosh. So they made this search and rescue effort
yes,
for no one. Oh
yes.
my gosh.
And
Wow.
it's happened in the Great Lakes. We had a couple of boats come ashore in Cleveland, and the Coast Guard, immediately sent out actually a C-130 cargo plane to search, and a couple of helicopters. And turns out that somebody had just stolen them from a vendor, a rental place, and instead of taking them back because they were afraid they'd get caught, they just abandoned them. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah, tens of thousands of dollars in rescue costs. So
Oh my
so get a little
gosh.
sticker from your Coast Guard Auxiliary, put your name and your address and your phone number on there. And that way, if it does wash away from your cottage and somebody finds it, you'll know where it's at. You can go pick it up.
Yeah, that even happens on the inland lakes. We had a storm
Oh yeah.
last year, and somebody's dock actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was really crazy. Well, I guess I want to go back, and I'll probably, when I go to edit, I'll splice and move it. Maybe, I don't know. Um, but one of the things that I just thought of that we didn't go too far into, we talked about the currents and stuff, but I wanted to mention the infographic that you guys have too, which I think is really great. I think because a lot of people are, they can listen to us yak, but I think
Yeah.
having
Visuals.
that visual is really powerful and super helpful, I think. So can we talk a little bit about your infographic that you guys put out? Both, I think you have a couple of them,
We
right?
do. Yeah. I think we have 4 or
Okay.
5 now. So when we're talking about dangerous currents on the Great Lakes, the most dangerous current on the Great Lakes is a structural current. And that's where the wind and the water is moving. Say again, I'm gonna put us over in Sheboygan, and the wind's out of the south, and so when the wind and the waves hit the pier, that water has to go around it. It's like the water is being pushed by the wind up, and so what happens is it goes up
And
and
that's called what?
it's called a
What is that called?
structural current.
Structural current. Okay.
The most dangerous around the Great Lakes, because our structures are all solid things and the water flows around them. Most people know about a rip current. It's not a tide, has nothing to do with the tide, so the term rip tide is not really an accurate term. But a rip current is a break in the sandbar with waves coming over the sandbar, and the infograph will show you this a lot better. The waves are coming over the sandbar, and then the water builds up near shore, and as it flows back, it needs to go out into the open water, because water always seeks its own level. It will funnel through a cut in the sandbar, and the water is actually flowing away from shore. And there's a lot of times when you're walking along the beach and you can actually see it, the water moving laterally down the shore, and it may be from a longshore current, which is just wind blowing along the shore without any structures or any currents there. And there have been times when I've stepped into Lake Michigan and there's a strong longshore current. You can barely stand up in one place. But when the waves are coming over the sandbar, that water needs to go back out into the lake, and it will find a cut in the sandbar. And this is really dangerous for a couple of reasons. One is that it can be very difficult to almost impossible to swim against. The other is you can have a calm day the next day, and someone's walking along a sandbar, and now suddenly the sandbar is gone because this rip channel has been cut in the
Oh,
sandbar.
wow. Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
had unfortunate incidents where family members have been walking along a sandbar, and then the last person can't touch the bottom where the cut is, and gets into trouble. And because drowning is swift and silent, there's no waving and no yelling. They don't even realize that the person went underwater.
Oh, yeah.
So anytime there's waves, and even in some cases where there are no waves, where the Boardman River comes into Traverse Bay, if you've ever paddled along there, right?
Yeah.
The current
Oh, yeah.
will push you off. So if there's a river or a creek running in, it can cut a hole in the sandbar, and it can actually cause the same kind of current going along there. So just be aware of, and then just to confuse things even more, there's a phenomenon called a seiche, think it's SEISCH, I think, which is a really bizarre phenomenon where the water in the lakes are like a bathtub. And if you're in the bathtub, and I'm sure as a kid you did this, you may still do it. You push all the water to one end of the bathtub, and it sloshes back to the other end of the bathtub.
Oops, I'm so sorry. Hold on one
okay.
second. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I should put this on airplane mode so the phone won't interrupt. I always forget to do that. And then okay, there we go. Airplane mode.
I just turned mine off because I got a call. So a seiche is when a storm or pressure system at one end of the lake or wind at one end of the lake pushes water toward the other end of the lake. It actually lowers the lake level at the windward side and raises the lake level at the leeward side. And then when the wind stops, right, or the pressure changes, it sloshes back.
Wow.
Kind of like a tidal wave, but it's a totally different kind of phenomenon. And in the 1950s, we had a seiche that from a big storm up in northern Wisconsin that blew a wall of water down towards southern Michigan, and it bounced off of the Michigan side and then connected back up with another portion of the wave and hit Chicago. And an 8 to 10 foot wave hit Chicago on a calm, sunny day. And 80 people had to be rescued.
I am not surprised by that at all. There were times when I lived there. I lived close to Lakeshore Drive, not too far from Loyola University.
Okay, sure.
And
did you ever go to Pratt Pier?
What was that?
You ever go to Pratt Pier?
No, I would go to Loyola Beach sometimes, but I lived across the street from near Burger Park and Thorndale. Yeah. But sometimes when you drive on Lakeshore Drive, especially as you get closer to downtown, those waves were by Fullerton Beach.
Sure. Yeah.
Those waves would come crashing up against the rocks. I mean, they would be 20 feet high.
Yeah.
You couldn't stand too close to the rocks. And there were times where Lakeshore Drive would get flooded.
Right.
People don't, and to give people perspective who are not familiar with Chicago, Lakeshore Drive runs along Lake Michigan, and it's extremely busy, if you can imagine, because it goes right through downtown Chicago all the way to the south side, and from the north side to the south side. And the beaches are relatively big. I mean, I don't know in feet how many, but the beaches are relatively big, especially when you get downtown to Oak Street Beach and stuff. Yep. So for that to go up over the beach, so the water has to come all the way on the beach, which is hundreds of feet, the beach, and all the way to Lakeshore Drive. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's hurricane level winds, really.
Right. And then there are times when the drop from Lakeshore Drive down to the pedestrian path, right?
Yes.
And then to the rocks to the water, where it's 3 or 4 foot drop to the water.
Yes.
And yet that will and the pedestrian walk will be covered certain times of the year when the wind is strongly out of the north. Absolutely.
Yeah. So and it's so fascinating how, because we're on the other side of Lake Michigan, so, Chicago versus Traverse City. Yeah. And so it's just so fascinating, the different lake effect that happens. And I mean, we could probably talk for another couple hours on that. It's just so interesting, all of that physics. So we just talked about the seiche and the current and the structural current. So what are some of the other types of currents?
Sure. A longshore current is simply that the current runs along the shore. So if the wind is running parallel to shore, it will cause a longshore current. And I love talking to little kids about this. This is where and I'm, if you spend a lot of time on the lake, I know that you know this with your kids. You tell the kids, okay, we put our red umbrella right here. So this is where all of our stuff is. if you weren't going to go out and play in the water, we're going to stay right in front of the red umbrella. But before they know it, they're 100 yards down the beach. And I told you to stay in front of the red umbrella. Well, what happened is
I couldn't help it.
yeah, they had no idea. This little tiny current just keeps gently nudging them. Every time their feet come off the bottom and go back down, they're just going a little bit more and more toward the longshore current. Before they know it, they turn around and look to where shore was. The red umbrella should be right there. No, you've drifted, 100 yards and didn't even realize it. Sometimes it's something, like I said, sometimes it's strong. Sometimes it's very difficult to walk in. We see it a lot with, and the same thing with offshore winds. I can't stress how dangerous offshore winds are. We've had situations where, our executive director, Dave Benjamin, rescued someone with his stand-up paddleboard that was on a great big, it's either a unicorn or a swan. I don't remember which one, but these great big inflatable toys that people have.
Yes, you see those all the time.
Like an 8-year-old girl is on this swan,
no life jacket,
and keep it right here next to shore, said mom or dad, and the next thing you know, they're offshore farther than they can swim back, and they have to make a choice. Do I stay on the raft and end up, in the middle of the lake, or do I try and swim for shore? And sometimes that ends up being a deadly mistake. But Dave was able to, paddle out and hook the swan to his board and pull it back in. It doesn't take much current, especially if you're going to be at the lake for a couple hours. We have a great video of somebody has an inflatable alligator, and the wind's blowing about 20 miles offshore or so. And you see this little kid fall off the alligator, and next thing you know, the alligator goes, and his dad or an uncle or someone, is swimming out after it. And then you just see the wind pick it up, and it starts blowing,
taking it,
rolling in. And luckily he decides better of that. And, somebody up in Sheboygan picked up the alligator for the afternoon. And we've had situations where a friend of mine is a lifeguard in Florida, down at Clearwater Beach, and somebody on spring break was on just an inflatable air mat, and the Coast Guard picked him up 1.5 miles offshore, severely sunburned.
Oh my gosh, I bet. Yeah, holy cow. So with that carrying out idea, and I've had that experience myself. And sadly I was with a friend, and thankfully she had her phone. I had actually just dropped it shortly before that in the bay, and it sunk. Phones don't float unless you have a floaty thing on it, FYI. So yeah,
that's a rough lesson to learn.
Oh my gosh. And we got carried out, and this is one of my life lessons, and why I'm passionate about water safety and knowing your conditions and stuff, because it was like glass. And like you said earlier, all of a sudden it changed, and we got carried out, and we were having to paddle upwind. And at that time I didn't know about going across, and paddling back. I mean, I had to kneel because I was getting thrown off the board. And I did have a leash and a life jacket on, thank goodness. We both did. But I was kneeling, the tops of my feet were getting bloody because I was hanging on for dear life, just paddling my heart out. And we couldn't get back. My friend finally called the 911, and the fireman boat came out, and they loaded us up, and they're like, dude, you gotta paddle parallel to the shore. I was like, I didn't know. And we couldn't make, and thank goodness, we weren't hurt. And I'm so grateful for that. And I was grateful for them. And they were really nice about it. They razzed us about it a little bit. But thankfully it was a scenario where we could laugh about it later. And we brought them some cookies later, but my friend baked cookies and took it to him.
Good.
But it could have been not funny. And so so let's talk a little bit about that, carrying out, and what we can do if something like that does happen, if that weather changes in a heartbeat, because it was literally 1 minute to the next. I mean, it came up fast. That one came up so fast.
Right.
And
Right.
so yeah, let's talk about what we can do in those scenarios to get ourselves to safety.
Almost all. I never say never. I never say always, but almost always, your best course of action is staying with the craft.
Yes,
Because
which we did. We did that. We did the one thing right.
it provides you with flotation. And when I teach preschool kids and elementary school kids, I tell them if there's one thing that you remember from today's talk, that's flotation is the key. If somebody's drowning and we can provide them flotation, we can save their life. If someone is on a stand-up paddleboard and they have flotation, they're much, 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 much safer than if they don't have the board. They don't have some kind of flotation with them. The board is preferable to just a life jacket because it's much easier. You can get a lot more distance, a lot more travel farther with paddling on the board than swimming with a life jacket on. But yeah, offshore winds are a tremendous danger. And unfortunately, we'll see some fatalities every year because people don't understand the dynamics of it, and they don't simply, take it as they're walking down to the beach, notice a flag. Which way is the flag pointing? That's the best use of those colored flags, by the way, in my opinion, is to tell you which way the wind is blowing, so that you can and how strong the wind is. So that you can make better choices as you go out there. But that's a real common scenario on real big water. On small inland lakes, not nearly as big an issue. You get blown to the other side of the lake and have to do the walk of shame.
Get off and knock on somebody's door.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what should we do in that scenario to get back to shore? We talked about that.
Yep. Like most things,
parallel.
it's prevention is the easiest thing. Avoid it from happening.
Yes.
if it does happen. Paddling on your knees will decrease your wind resistance, increase your stability. Choke up on the paddle. You don't need to put the paddle way up here and try to paddle, but choke up on it so you're paddling it on your knees. You can sit on the board and paddle, depending on where you're at. If it's a small lake and the wind comes up really strong and really fast, there have been times when I've just blown to the nearest shoreline and taken some shelter, especially and thunder and lightning is another thing. You don't want to be anywhere near the water when there's thunder and lightning, but you also don't want to be underneath a tree.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to be holding that lightning rod.
No. Yeah.
The paddle. I always tell people you don't want to hold the lightning rod when it's lightning. Yeah.
and a really good practice to have is something that an old seasoned lifeguard, grizzled lifeguard, told me a long time ago, is to guard scared. And what that means is, while you're guarding, because guarding is a really boring occupation, start thinking about worst case scenarios.
Yeah.
And so I'll do that when I'm paddling. Last year, before I had moved back to Michigan, I took a trip back here and was paddling on Gun Lake in near Kalamazoo. Beautiful little lake. And while I'm paddling, the sky got a little darker, and pretty soon there's a couple of flashes. And so the whole time I was paddling, I'm like, all right, what am I going to do if this storm starts producing thunder and lightning? And I turned back to where I was going, but I wanted to get a paddle in, so I'm not. So I just kind of paddled back and forth near where I was at shore. But when the storm hit, like you said, the wind changed direction 180 degrees, and now suddenly I'm having real trouble getting back to where I put in from. So I just paddled downwind to where the closest shoreline was and hunkered down for, 15-20 minutes. The storm blew past, and I was able to paddle back safely. So be aware you can always. And you mentioned the difference between Chicago and Traverse City. I loved guarding on the beaches in southern Michigan, South Haven, Holland area, because you can see the storms coming from 100 miles away. My lifeguard friends in Chicago are always surprised because these storms will blow up out of nowhere, and the skyscraper, the 100-foot skyscrapers will block their view, and they're looking the other direction. So the storm's coming from behind them, and the first glimpse that they may be in trouble is when they hear lightning, and it could be on them in a couple of seconds. Whereas
Yes.
here on the other side of the lake, we can usually see it coming because most of the storms come from the southwest.
That's that's really great advice. And I think the biggest takeaway is be prepared. I mean, I think everything that we've talked about is be prepared, because there are so many variables, and you really don't know. The weather can change in a heartbeat. I mean, the weather forecast, it can say, okay, the storm's going to be at 5 when it ends up coming in at 3, whatever. I mean, it's an art and a science, right?
I'll tell you another real quick story, because I think this is just absolutely hysterical. I'm at the Platte River, where the Platte River comes into Lake
really
Michigan.
Popular paddling spot.
Yeah, by
kayaking spot.
Sleeping Bear sand dunes, and we're there doing a water safety event. There was a really, really sad story of a young man that fatally passed away kayaking there, Tyler Busick. And but anyway, so we're starting to take down our little display thing, and because there's a storm coming in. I mean, you can see it. It's on the other side of the lake, and it's black and ugly and moving this way at a pretty good clip. And I said to this family that was getting ready to launch their fishing boat, I said, it looks like there might be some weather coming in. And I said, no, I just checked my phone, and it says it's not gonna start raining until 3 o'clock. It was about 1 o'clock or so. I said, really? I said, you believe your phone and not your. I said, just look. And we got all our stuff loaded up in the car and everything, and it started raining. And here's this guy, and now he's loading his family back up in the car. But they were going to go out. I'm like, technology is great. Don't get me wrong. Check the weather forecast. Check all that other stuff. But when you're out on the water, keep your head on a swivel. If you're paddling in one direction for a while, every 100 strokes or so, just turn around and see what's happening, what's around you. And then another really big thing about being prepared that you mentioned is notice things around you. On a stand-up paddleboard, one of the huge advantages is you have such a good view from where you're at. Just pay attention. Are there kids on flotation devices that are being blown offshore in the wind? Does somebody look uncomfortable? And don't be afraid to just paddle over and ask them if they're, how you doing? You doing okay? Hey, you know what? The wind's blowing your unicorn towards Chicago. Just, probably a good time to stop back. Sometimes you get a little one-fingered salute and some colorful language. But that's okay. Just be aware. Absolutely. Situational awareness is so key. Anytime you're underwater, I don't care if you're stand-up paddleboarding or fishing or just swimming, whatever you're doing, that situational awareness will really come in handy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the biggest things, especially like because of course we're tourist location, so we get lots of people all summer long, of course, but during the holidays, it's not only tourists, but it's locals, their families are coming for a visit, whatever. And I mean, it gets crazy, on the bay, but especially in some of the inland lakes even. And I mean, I almost got clipped by a boat last year. I was like, I am not paddling this. I don't remember if it was the 4th of July or what. And I was paddling close to shore because I know there's boat traffic. I literally had to stand there with my paddle like this, because they were coming straight at me. I thought I was going to have to jump in the water. It was crazy. And I'm like, but if I hadn't been paying attention, I mean, maybe they might not have seen me. But yeah, so that's super important. Just being aware and being careful, choosing times maybe when there's less traffic on the water.
That is great advice. Absolutely great. Yeah, 4th of July weekend is probably not the day to go paddling around the Torch Lake sandbar.
No, don't do a
don't go anywhere.
Tour.
Don't go anywhere near it. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that So this has been great, Bobby. I want to just touch on just quickly, what exactly does the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project do? You guys do so many things,
Right.
but if you can just kind of bullet point what it is and kind of what locations that you guys do you work with any specific organizations to facilitate your education? Yeah, so just kind of touch on that.
So we've operated in 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. We haven't been to Lake Ontario yet. We've, I think there are 7 states that border the Great Lakes, or there might be 6, and then Canada, but we've been to most of them. We haven't been to New York, but we've been to Pennsylvania, we've been to Ohio, we've been to Indiana, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Lake Michigan. We've done classes all over the place.
Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot in Illinois.
You didn't mention Illinois. That's where I'm from, so I just gotta, you know.
we worked extensively with the Chicago Lifeguards. We worked with Wilmette Lifeguards up at the north end, and Evanston, and up into Port Washington, Wisconsin, and Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. All of our stuff is custom delivered, so we do a lot of school presentations, because water safety is an interesting thing. We would get hired to do, for example, I won't mention the town because I don't want to embarrass them, but we were hired to do a big water safety event up in one of the northern Michigan towns, well-known tourist town, well publicized, put out a lot of information, and nobody showed up. And when I go to stand-up paddleboard races, there's a lot of really fun races that I do, that I love to do. And a lot of times they'll ask me to do a little safety seminar beforehand, and I'm more than happy to do that, but nobody shows up. And people are like, "That's such a great idea. I'm so glad you're doing this." "Oh, you're going to be there?" "Well, no, I paddle all the time, and I really don't, I don't really need it, but those people that don't paddle, those new paddle, they all need it, but I don't. I know it." So people think that they have a great deal of knowledge about the Great Lakes, and they don't know what they don't know. And
I there's a whole maritime academy to train seafarers for being it's specific, and it's specific to the Great Lakes. Like, you can't be an ocean,
right? Some of it has carryover to other areas.
The Great Lakes,
right? But
like, you have to have, right?
Yes.
Am I
right? Absolutely. Yep. So what was the question again?
It was just like specifically. No, that's okay. I apologize. So we were talking about, like, what specifically, like, organizations do you work with?
Right.
You were just saying you go to sup races to give education. Right. And I found that interesting. One of the things you said, besides people at the sup race not showing up, but for some of the northern Michigan, like, there's another organization in the area that works with the schools here, the public schools here, on educating kids on water safety, and they'll teach them, like, how to rescue. Because one of the things we see with drownings too here is, like, the kids will see their friend and they'll jump in, try to help their friend, and then you have a double drowning. Right. So that's one of the things they talk about too. When my kids took swim lessons, they show them how to, like, lay on the thing and throw a rescue device, or like hold out a swim noodle, lay on your belly, that kind of thing. So so when you're going into these, so it really surprises me that people wouldn't come to some of these education things, especially since we're all surrounded by water in northern Michigan. I mean, everywhere you look, it takes 5 to 10 minutes to get to a body of water. Right.
Well, again, people, the original question was, what do we do? What does the Surf Rescue Project do? And so the reason that we do a lot of school programs, and the reason that the school program that I think it's the Red Cross up in Traverse City, and the Power Squadron, Harv Norris with the Power Squadron does a really good job up there. The reason that it's so effective is that the kids are a captive audience.
Yes.
And so if we can educate them early on, hopefully they can carry with them some of those things. But like I said, unfortunately, people think they already know what they need to know. and don't think that they're going to get any more information. So things like this podcast are a great way to reach some of these people. And we've already gone you're going to need that full 3 hours here.
I'm probably going to do this in parts when we edit it.
Okay. And so we do the education piece, and we do all of our stuff is custom designed. So if we were going to come up and do a piece in Traverse City, we would use photographs from Traverse City, and we would talk about the weather in Traverse City. We talk about the difference, for example, between Sutton's Bay and Bowers Harbor. They're both harbors, but they're totally different in the way things that happen. And we talk about things like the temperature differential. I don't know if you've noticed this before, but if the wind is out of the, I'm trying to think of, we were up one day at Bowers Harbor, and it was beautiful, sunny, 70 degrees. And we went just to the other side of the bay. We went over to East Bay, and it was 40 degrees and cloudy and foggy, and the water temperature was about 10 or 15 degrees colder. I mean, just in 10 miles.
Oh yeah.
And that stuff is just mind blowing. So we do educational programs. We track the drownings that happen on the Great Lakes, and that's really tough work. But the hardest work that we do is helping the grieving families deal with the loss of loved ones and understand why it happened and how it happened. Help them deal with the media fallout, because social media is just horrific. Whenever there's a drowning, talking about how stupid people were and talking about how they just had some common sense. And it's just really, really awful. So we do that. We work with a lot of municipalities in the aftermath, trying to advocate for rescue equipment on the beaches, rescue equipment on the piers, lifeguards on the beaches, help them strategize how to pay for some of these programs, and do best practices, and then we'll do whatever we can. We do surf lifeguard training for the few beaches that do have lifeguards on our beaches now, and we're doing some legislative work, working with other organizations. There's the National Drowning Prevention Alliance we work with, the Great Lakes Water Safety Consortium. We work with the Red Cross in certain areas. We work with local municipalities, and just trying to get the word out there and trying to prevent these senseless tragedies before they happen.
That's wow. I mean, that is so much. That is such phenomenal thing. And I think the one thing that you said that really, I mean, all the education is awesome. Even working with the legislative stuff, I mean, that's huge. I know what that's like even, and I've done some advocacy work in that regard too, not with drowning, but other things, and how difficult that is. But I love that you guys also work with the grieving families, and that's such a work of compassion. Well, everything that you guys are doing is a work of compassion, and yeah, it's just so tragic that people would want to compound a tragedy with judgment. Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and you would think that it would be the opposite. Like, hey guys, before you go out, this is a good example of water safety. Let's talk about water safety. And hopefully we can kind of transform that mindset from victim blaming to, hey, this is an unfortunate opportunity to educate on water safety. Because I'm thinking of a drowning, it was maybe a year or two ago in the lagoon in Diversey Harbor. One of my friends she's a big paddleboard racer, and she teaches lessons on the lagoon there. She was in one of my paddle trainings that I went to years ago, and she teaches lessons. And in that lagoon, I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to the lagoon. A lot of the rowing teams practice on the lagoon in Chicago there. And yeah. And there's a sup rental place. There's a yacht club there and all that. And but anyway, there was a guy who was an expert swimmer, and he drowned there. And it's this little body where, I mean, there's no wake, there's no wave, and it was literally like unexplained. I mean, who knows if he had some health thing? I can't remember if anything got discovered afterwards, but here's this guy who's like an expert swimmer
Mhm.
in a lagoon, and he drowned.
Right.
So I think, it can happen to anyone.
It can.
I-
It absolutely can. And I think when we talk about the effect of social media, I really think it's a defense mechanism. That if I
yeah,
can convince my own self that it could never happen to me or my family, I can live with
yeah,
myself. But otherwise, it's a terrible fear that I have. So I have to
yeah,
berate this person. I have to believe this person is stupid or lacks common sense or is weak in order for me to, you know, to not self-reflect and go, oh, that could have happened to me. When
yeah,
you're absolutely right, 100% right. It can happen to anybody.
yeah,
It
yeah.
happens to anybody.
Well, Bobby, thank you so much. This has been so phenomenal. And I want to make sure that we put out there how people can get in touch with you guys. Like, where can they see you on social media, your website? Where can they get information to, if they want to have you guys do a water safety thing in their school or their education? I mean, it sounds like you've been all over. You've been to Australia.
Yeah.
You've done presentations everywhere.
Yeah.
What locations, because I'm sure you don't do this all by yourself. So yeah, just give us a little bit more info about that.
So our website is glsrp.org, Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project.org. We have a big presence on Facebook. We do a lot of work on Facebook. Our website has a wealth of information. It has the drowning statistics that we have. It actually has categorized the over 1,000 drownings that we've had in the 12 years now that we've been doing this. Our contact information is on there. My cell phone number is on there. I always answer the phone, even when it comes up as potential spam, because it could be a family member. It could be someone who's looking for information. And so we take those cold calls. Yeah, we'd love to work with your, if you have any organization, any group, we'd love to come and spend some time and do some education. And all of us in the drowning prevention community, not just in the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, but we all have a reason. And thankfully, my reason is not that I lost a loved one to a drowning. I was close enough to be able to witness that. Now I know many people who have actually been there and lost loved ones, and I can't imagine what they go through. John Coker, who's one of our board members, a absolutely fantastic man, has sponsored many presentations that we've done in the Chicagoland area. He's from Tinley Park. And people think that what we do is amazing, but I tell you what, John will introduce us at hundreds of school presentations, and he will relive his son Matthew's drowning every single time he does that. So that's one of the reasons that I'm able to, keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm so passionate about it, is because we just got to do something to prevent these horrible tragedies from happening.
Yes. And the whole point, I think we talked about this the other day too, is like the whole point is talking about safety. And I have that on my website, is like, we want you to learn to be safe. We want you to know what you're doing, so you can have fun. That's the whole point. Like, I know
absolutely.
a lot of our conversation has
it's been
like
so dark and
deep
sad.
and
dark. Yeah. I agree 1,000%. So people, stand-up paddleboarding is awesome. It's a blast. Windsurfing and surfing and kayaking and kiteboarding and foiling and swimming in Lake Michigan, and all of these things. They make life worth living.
Yes.
But please do them in a safer way. Do them with at least a little bit of knowledge, and take care of your loved ones. Take care of your fellow paddlers. We're all in this together. So.
Yes, for sure. And also, I just want to say that, as I take that responsibility on myself, and a lot of us in that, not just recreationally, but in that industry, like, we really need to lift our voices. I know there's a lot of organizations out there who do say, and even I shared what you guys put in your social media the other day about Red Paddle Company, telling, talking about leashes and but yeah, I'm thankful that there are companies out there. There are rental places out there who are passionate about that. I'm in a network of people in the paddle fit community who are really passionate about that in their businesses and really want to get people out there on their boards, knowing what they're doing so they can have fun, so they can go out there with their family and their friends, and so that we have this serene place that we can just, let all our thoughts, our stress or whatever, and enjoy nature. And that's our whole point. And we really want people to be able to have a beautiful day at the beach, at the lake, and not have it turn into something that's
absolutely
a whole
nothing
nother
ruins
thing.
a day at the beach like a drowning.
That's right.
So go out and have fun, paddle, get out there, get in the sunshine, build a sandcastle, paddle around and enjoy yourself, but do it in a safe manner.
Yes. Well, Bobby, thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I would love to talk to you again, and we can delve in, maybe do some deep dives on a little bit more minutia of the big thing that we've talked about. But I think we've covered a lot of ground. I really hope that people will really take this message to heart and just keep doing what you're doing. I'm so thankful for you guys and the wealth of knowledge that you have to offer. And so just thank you so much. And
it's been a pleasure, Holly. It really has.
Thank you.
Absolutely.